memory is not just about remembering, right? It's about being memorable and making your message memorable.
Celebrity master memory coach Tansel Ali is a 4-time Australian memory champion who has authored multiple books.
Best known for memorizing 2 entire Yellow Pages phone directories in just 24 days, he is the go-to expert the Australian media seek on the topic of improving memory.
Tansel is a globally sought-after memory coach who has transformed the way thousands of people learn and communicate.
Today, he works with executives, entrepreneurs, actors, students, and athletes to tap into the memory skills and techniques that can help them achieve their goals.
He also shares simple memory techniques on YouTube and other social media platforms to help his global audience improve their own memory skills and wants to help people, like you, achieve your goals too.
Tansel, thanks for joining us on People with a Passion. Give us examples of who you work with and how these methods can help them.
It's crazy the variety of people that come to me with the memory techniques. I mean, yeah, you got your standard student that wants to do well in school, like your final years. You've got your exec that wants to remember their speeches. People that want to pass their professional exams, medical exams, law exams, all of that. But I've also had people, and this was the weird stuff. Like, I don't know if you know about remote viewing, what the CIA used to use to, just visualize what's on the other side of the world or planets or whatever. So I've actually done a lot of memory skills work with people in this area as well. And it turns out they started, doing really, really well. It's like, okay, cool. You have poker players, you've got, people, essentially actors, you've got people sitting all these wine tasting exams, like the sommelier exams, just an insane amount of diversity with memory. And I think the biggest, most rewarding one for me, because it's helped me, was the stress and anxiety, because I didn't realize that stress was all stories, right? You're thinking of a story going on in your head. You're replaying moments. And if you can change that around because you've improved your memory skills now and you can make better stories, then that's going to, put you on a different path. So there's been those, even things like weight loss and physical training, right? Where the mind goes, the body follows, right? You're in that space in basketball, and so helping sport athletes, throw better or get them to use certain skills that they haven't been able to before because it's just fully physical focus and not mental focus. That puts them in a whole different area.
So the big question that I had when I mentioned to some of my closest friends that I'm having a 4-time memory champion on the podcast was the first thing they said was, which is a question I'm sure you get, is can you ask them how I can remember people's names? Is there an easy way to remember people's names? Why is it important that we remember people's names and why are we forgetting those names? And what is that easy method?
Yeah, names are probably one of the hardest things to remember, actually. The reason for that is a name is abstract. So it's a word that doesn't make any sense, right? So if someone says Tansel to you, you're like, yeah, and like you haven't got any association, any meaning behind it. Now, if you know the meaning behind the name, yeah, there's something to hold on to. So that's why it's hard to remember names. And not only that, when you're meeting someone, you might be meeting for a specific reason, like to know more about them, or you want to talk about a particular topic. So your focus goes away from their name to the actual topic that you're talking about. So even if you're focused on remembering a name, oh, Craig, and then off to the podcast, right? So the challenge there is, okay, what's the technique? What's the approach to be able to remember the name? Now, I'm glad you asked me this because if I wanted to remember the name Craig, right, I have to find an association, right? So if I come across a name, I have to create an image, right? A story and association. So Craig for me is actually quite an important name, right? My cat's name was Craig. So if I meet another Craig, right, I can imagine, Craig jumping on that Craig and scratching his face, I'm sure all Craigs are male, so I'll say his face. That's the association I have. If I, meet a John, I'm going to picture them in the toilet, right? As in a John. If I meet a VJ Ranganamachandran, right? I'm going to picture VJ, DJing, right? An orangutan jumps on him, right? Causes all this drama and everyone's chundering. right? So I'm just making a story with the name. My name, Tansel, Tinsel, Tonsil. Someone yelled out, "Hey, you Tansel," right? So many associations. So as soon as you start playing around with stories, images, whatnot, it's so much easier to then recall the name because all you have to do is, oh yeah, why was this person bobbing up and down? Ah, their name's Bob.
You demonstrated how easy it can be just by association. Why do we actually forget stuff?
Very important question because people always come to me about, oh, I want to remember stuff. No one really talks about forgetting. Look, there's a number of reasons why. There could be, reasons where you could be overwhelmed. A lot of people come to me because they're overwhelmed. And once you fix that overwhelm, their memory naturally improves. So it's not necessarily a memory problem. Could be overwhelm. It could be mental conditions, or it could just be they've got a crap memory, right? Reason why people generally forget is they don't have a system to remember. And when you don't have a system to remember, what happens is you resort to a default state, which could be rote learning, repetition, which we know is not the most effective way to learn, right? Yes, we've mastered it to a certain extent, but you can repeat something 100 times and still forget, and it becomes stressful. And the more stress you're under, then less likely you're going to remember as well. So there's a number of factors.
So, on the flip side of that question is how does memory work? Like, what's happening inside our brains?
When we're trying to remember something, traditionally, as I mentioned, we're rote learning, so we're repeating over and over and over again, but not getting anywhere, right? Usually. The thing there is that we're trying to hold on to information in our brain, but the thing is, it doesn't get stored anywhere. It's like it sits in the ether somewhere in the cloud, right? You're trying to retrieve it, and you're going, "Where the bloody hell are you?" Right? Then you have to go, let me just go back and, repeat over and over again. So that's what happens. So what we need to do is we need to be able to create spots in our brain, almost like addresses, right? Or filing cabinets or folders on a computer. We need to create this. And then once we have holding spots, what we can do is we can put the information in there. And then once the information's in there, all we have to do is saying, what was this topic about? Or what did this person say? Or what was the 20 steps to blah, blah, blah? Hang on, I've got a folder for that. Let me just go there and retrieve it. So it's actually as simple as that. And once you know how to do that, then the issue isn't about remembering now. The issue is, well, how fast can I recall it? So it completely flips the script once you know some strategies.
We're taught a certain way to remember things. So, what do you think is the downside of what we're taught today, and why aren't we learning some of these methods to improve memorization?
Yeah, I mean, the downside is that not many people know about these skills, even though they've been around for centuries. The schooling system doesn't have, apply these memory techniques or learn these skills to read faster, comprehend better. I mean, reading, like every year you do reading ever since you're a little kid, but no one shows you how to get to that next level in reading. So what I mean by that is at the moment, you're sort of taught to read word by word and that's it. Like that's where it stops. Whereas if you look at something like speed reading is essentially reading in images. So now, how do you progress to reading in images? And then how do you encode so that you're not just reading word by word, you're grabbing the information in large chunks.
I actually did a speed reading course as a younger man. And I was extremely angry that it wasn't taught as a component of school, which was chunking words together and visualizing. And basically, I can peruse. I do 3 readings of an exam, say, for example, at university, when they were given time to peruse, I could just sift through it 3 or 4 times and then I would be set. And all the nerves would disappear too because I wasn't worried that I didn't know it was coming. So learning how to speed read, can you speak to that as a tool and how you help people? And again, can anyone learn how to speed read?
Yes, speed reading, man, it took me ages to get because I initially read speed reading books. I practiced over and over again. I went to courses and I still could not do it. And I'm like, I could do the memory stuff easily. Why can't I do speed reading? So that's the one thing that challenged me quite a lot. And then as I started running the courses, I realized that speed reading is just reading in images. That's all it is, right? If we look at the TV shows, or I'll take that as an example, we just kick back passively and just watch, and we still understand. Whereas when we're reading, we have to be so active. Why? Because the words you have to encode, right? Encode means take them as abstract data to a visual medium inside your head, right? And if it's visual, it's like you're watching a TV. How do you do that? That's where speed reading comes in. And with speed reading, let's say you group words together, right? Let's say the sentence is, the cat jumped over the bridge, right? You're only getting the image once I said bridge, right? Now, if we're to speed read that, I'm going to group words together. So the cat jumped could be one, over could be one, the bridge could be one. Or you can just have the cat jumped over the bridge, right? Two things. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying to view that in less goes instead of reading word by word. You're chunking, as you mentioned earlier. You're grouping the words together so you can actually see what's going on in the sentence. Now, the challenge with this is that when you come across abstract words, right, in reading technical documents, all of that, whenever you chunk, your brain's still going, but I don't know what that word is or what context it's in, right? So this is where the practice and memory training and everything come handy, because that helps you to read a lot better and visualize a lot better. So encoding exercises, which is what memory training is, actually helps with speed reading. So that speed reading and memory are exactly the same thing, believe it or not. It's just for marketing purposes. People over the years ago, oh, here's memory, here's speed reading, here's that. Whereas I just put them all together. So if you get any of my books and stuff, I've just got memory and speed reading together because I think that's how it should be. And that's how people should understand it as well. Traditional methods, just say here, read word by word, no one does anything. So it's more about not being implemented in schools and, grassroots level where we pick up this skill. So therefore, there's people like myself going, you know what, here are these strategies, this is how you can do it. Unfortunately, there's not many people like us, so we have to put our message far and wide, even though it's been around for many, many years. And that's the fight I'm sort of involved in, is how can people learn this in the best possible way, and how can they use it, not just for their learning, but for so many other areas, which will no doubt cover as well.
Let's say I want to improve my memory. What is a challenge or a hurdle that I have to overcome? Is it something that anyone can do?
Interesting question, because when I first started, I thought I just naturally had a bad memory. I was terrible at it. I would forget everything, right, up until my early 20s. So I just thought it was just a natural ability, gifting. When I learned the skills, and that's what it was just a bunch of skills, I thought, hang on, I can remember everything now. So really, it's more about gaining the knowledge from it. So the challenge is, where do I find this knowledge? Who can I go to? Right? And how do I implement it? Now, the good thing is, I mean, when I first started, yeah, we just had Google, and I'd Google memory techniques, and that's how I came across them. But now you've got, YouTube. I mean, I've got 300 videos alone on YouTube, right? And I'm just one memory guy. You can imagine everyone else, right? So you got heaps of social media on there. You've got lots of books written, got apps. You've got so much variety on learning this stuff. So the challenge now is not so much learning about it. It's about, okay, how do I use this knowledge, right? Because I just met with someone before saying, yeah, I know the memory palace, but how do I use it? I want to know how to use it. I want to use it to my advantage. So that's where we're at now, where people have heard about memory techniques mostly, but now it's like, but I want to use it to my advantage and say, you know what? I want to improve my career. I want to remember speeches without any notes. I want to pass all these exams. I want to be a better coach. I want to make more money, whatever. So you can utilize these skills now, but it's about knowing and understanding how to use them.
What I might do is get you to just quickly outline some of the methods or techniques just by name and a quick definition of how they may well work. Maybe start with the memory palace.
Yeah, the memory palace is interesting because it's something that ancient Greeks used to use. It's called a method of loci, which I've outlined in my books. It could also be called the journey technique. Roman room is similar as well. And essentially what it is, just to, for all your listeners and viewers out there, all you do is you create certain spots in a sequential order. And then what you do is you attach items to remember it on there. So I'll give you an example, right? I pick a familiar spot that I know. So, for example, my house. And then I say, okay, I need to pick 10 spots from my house that I can move in order from. Right. So, for example, my first location spot could be my front fence because that's where I'm going to start. Then I go further into my house, and the second location could be my driveway. The third location could be my front door. Fourth, I go inside the house and I've got like a bedroom. So I might choose something from there. I might say, okay, there's my bed, right? So I've got 4 locations. Now what I can do is, okay, if I've got, say, 4 things to remember, or even, more than that, I can say, okay, let's say I'm going shopping, I need to get some milk, right? I make a story with milk and my first location, which was my front fence. So what I do is I make a connection via I'm pouring milk all over my fence, right? Or someone threw milk and it's gone all over the fence. It painted it white before it was a different color, right? So I'm making these associations. The sillier, the better, because it sticks out into your brain. And then the next one, I might get cereal, right? So someone just threw cereal all over down my driveway, right? And I'm stepping on cornflakes or something, right? And the third one is my front door. So I could say onions, right? Someone stuck onions on my front door and it stinks from onions. And the fourth one on my bed, it could be, Vegemite, right? Or butter, Vegemite, butter, whatever, right? I don't know where your listeners are from. They might not know Vegemite. Let's say butter. You know, Someone spread butter all over your bed. You hop in and it's all oily and greasy and sticky. Imagine butter all over your body, right? So that's the association that I make. So then I go back, say, okay, what was happening on my front fence? So if I asked you what was on my fence, what would you say?
It was milk,
Yes. And in my driveway, what did I have there?
cereals, right?
And then the door, we had onions, and then the bed. So you can see how the process works. Now, that's only 4 things, right? In memory competitions, because we have thousands of things to remember, we've got hundreds of these locations, right? And I've got like 60 around my house. I've got, 50 at my workplace. I've got 300 just walking down the street, right? That I've put into all spreadsheets. You don't have to remember 300, locations, because this is just competition that I use it for. But in everyday life, it's good for remembering things in order. So if you've got a speech, for example, and you've got 20 points, bang, map out 20 locations and put your key points in. Now you're remembering your talk. That's just one way anyway. There's various methods of doing that. So you can see if you've got a lot of information, this is good for remembering all those pretty much in order. Yeah.
So you talk about visual association there. You've talked about the memory palace. What's this concept of chunking? What's chunking?
Yeah, chunking is essentially grouping information together. So what happens is that, let's say you want to remember 50 things. In our brain, it's like, wow, I've got to remember 50 things. It's quite overwhelming. But if you group 50 things, into say 5 lots, now you've got 10 lots of 5 things, right? And it's actually easier for the brain to grasp that rather than seeing all 50. And it's a similar process to how speed reading works, I mentioned earlier. Instead of reading, say, 400 words on a page, you're looking at groups of words together, and you might actually get 20 instances or scenes in your head. It's so much easier to grab 20 scenes in your head as opposed to 400 single words. So that's what chunking is. And you can do this for many different things. Like I said, you're reading a whole page or someone's talking to you, and instead of trying to remember every single thing they said, you think, okay, what did we go through? And you might say, okay, in the 2.5 hours that we spoke, generally we just spoke about, introductions, the forgetting, concept, the memory techniques, blah, blah, blah. There might only be 6 things in there, but we covered 2.5 hours. And once you understand what's in that chunk, then you can remember what else is underneath as well. So it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah. So where you did that little memory exercise, the memory palace a moment ago, how important if you're someone presenting on a stage, say, would that strategy help be architecting a story or something like that if you're a keynote speaker?
Well, I mean, if you create your own location, it's going to be more memorable to you. So the difference between me and everyone else is I've been doing this for over 23 years. So my stories come pretty much instantaneous. And that's what I train. And that's what memory competitions are, is how fast we can make the stories and how many we can remember in the fastest time possible, right? Just your general lay person is not going to go that fast. So when you're learning techniques, the key skill is to essentially just go slow and expand the story, right? So for people that are, getting up on stage, whatever, yeah, you're going to need a little bit more time to craft the stories and make them memorable. But still, it's not like, you're going to need hours and hours of work. 15 minutes, and that's all it takes. I mean, I used to organize TED conferences, TEDx events here in Melbourne, and I used to train half the speakers. And I used to come to them with their 6-page script. I would tear them apart right in front of their face, and they'd almost be in tears. I said, you don't need to memorize your script word for word. Here's how you do it. And I'd get them to remember those bullet points into either locations or even just visualize them, because you don't need the locations if it's only 6 things. You just connect one point to the other. And because of that, they were able to not just remember their talk, but understand what they need to deliver to make the impact to their audience. Because memory is not just about remembering, right? It's about being memorable and making your message memorable, right? The reason why you're getting up to speak is to have an impact, not to just deliver words, right? So this is essentially a part of memory.
Another one of the methods that I see you have on your, I think it was on your website, mnemonics, if I say that correctly. What's this concept of mnemonics that can help people remember and retain information?
Yeah, it's just little shortcuts, I guess, little hacks like acronyms and things like that. The one with the music, like every good boy deserves fruit. If you're memorizing notes and stuff like that. So that's what mnemonics are. To be honest, I don't use it very often, if not at all, because the visual methods are just as powerful as everything. They can work more sort of, I won't say subconscious level, but in a level where you're not visualizing, or if it's auditory, I think of advertisements as well from ads. I mean, from my childhood, gee, I still remember the Pizza Hut number, the 131166. I mean, it doesn't remember that, right? In my age anyway. So that's all auditory. It's not nothing really visual. I don't remember how the ads were, but I remember the auditory from it. And plus it was repeated a million times. So you'd heard it a lot, but it's the way it was said, Yeah, it is very powerful indeed as well.
I know some of the things I remember most are linked to emotions. Are there any methods that are involved associated with using emotions or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about visualization, right? Emotions are on another level, because as soon as you start using your emotions, they're emotional triggers, and emotional triggers really help us to remember, right? So, and that's what I try and do with people. I say, okay, now visualize this. If they can't visualize, that's fine. I say, if you can add emotion in there, that's when you really get some memory involved. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that if we understand how to use our emotions in a way to make things more memorable, it's even more powerful. And I'll give you an example, because this is something that's helped me, and I hope it helps people out there listening, watching as well. Is I suffered from travel anxiety for many, many years. Having a chronic illness, it would always stress me out. What would happen is, because I've got a highly developed memory from storytelling, right? A lot of emotions come with that. And because there's not just visual storytelling in my head, there's a lot of emotional storytelling around the anxiety. So my anxiety would get worse. So the downside of memory, if you develop it too much, your the narrative that you build in your head is going to get worse, right? So that's a little thing there. Now, how do I get over it? Once I understood that this was happening, and it took me years as well, once I understood it, then I realized that, you know what, this is just a story. If I use memory principles, right, and I'll, talk about that as well, because emotion was one of them. If I use memory principles and change the story so that the positive is now memorable and the negative, I can almost use memory techniques to forget it, right? We can talk about the forgetting stuff as well, right? So now what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift in my story. Instead of, putting myself down all the time, it's going to be easier to rise up and get over it right? Literally get over it. And then once the story changes, your whole life changes, your thinking changes, everything else changes. So it's almost, I mean, you work with athletes, right? As a coach, this is what I do as well with athletes and other coaches. How do you shift that mindset so that you're always in flow and always in, high performance mode? Because you could easily go the other way as well. And there's really no difference between going really down and going really up. You're using the same skill, but it's just how does that shift occur? And it's all about the storytelling. So if you know how to use your emotions, tell the right story and weaken the other one, it is going to be a massive shift.
Remembering numbers. We talked about remembering names. The other thing that we commonly do is try and remember numbers. I mean, you've memorized 2 full yellow pages phone books back in the day. So if anyone would know how to remember a phone number, it's going to be you. So can you share anything that can fast track people to memorizing a phone number or a number where it's just left short-term memory?
You mentioned, at the start, what are some of the memory techniques? One of them is called the major system. And the major system is a system developed to remember numbers. Right now, it takes a bit of work to get this up and running. So I'll explain another system that's a lot easier as well. But just briefly explain what major system is. Every number, right, from 0 to 9, has a letter next to it. So 0 could be Z and S, 1 is T or D, 2 is an N, 3 is M, 4 is R, and so on, right? So if I get 2 digits together, what that means is I can now make up a word, right? So if I get 9 and 2, 9 is a P or a B, and 2 is an N, right? So now I can make up the word pen. Right. So now if I have 6 digits, it's really just going to be 3 words. And now I have to connect those words together into a story. Like the pen wrote on the dog, and the dog started chasing the cat from it, right? So the number there will be 92, right? Dog is D, is 1, 7 is G. So pen, dog, 17, and cat is 71. 7 is Kurt, 1 is T. So that's the major system, right? So if you didn't get that, that's okay. All you have to know is there's a system for remembering numbers using a code. The other one, probably the easier one for everyone else listening, is you can have rhyming numbers, right? From 1 to 9 or 0. So for example, 1 could be fun, bun, 2 could be shoe, 3 is tree, 4 door, 5 beehive, right? Up to 9 wine, 10 pen, right? So now what you can do is you can connect those numbers together into a story. So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, right? You got to remember. Bun, let's say, right? 2 is shoe, so you put your shoe in the bun, right? You threw it on the tree, right? And then 4 was door, and then the tree fell onto your door, right? Because we're talking Craig Rowe here. You're a powerful man, right? So you took the door down by throwing that bun with the shoe. So you can see how that works, right? You're just making a story, and yeah, you don't need to know the major system because really, in reality, how many digits do you really have to remember? Well, when you think about it, right? So it's not going to be more than 8. Like even phone numbers are easy because you got the mobile phone, you got the 04, just get rid of that and just chunk the next group, and that's it.
Now, let's take a short break to share some software we recommend.
Hey, StreamYard is my go-to platform for creating this podcast. What makes StreamYard a game changer is its ease of use. It's actually the reason I chose it myself, is because it seamlessly allows me to invite guests to record on my podcast. Now, if you're someone who's looking to go live to multiple platforms at the same time, then you really need to consider whether StreamYard's for you. The other thing it offers is local recording, which allows me to separate my files and my guest files so I have full creative control over the process. They're constantly adding new features, including an AI generator that now generates short form content with captions from the long form videos that I record on the platform. If you're someone who's looking to start a podcast or perhaps you're in business and you want to create a webinar, then StreamYard has a tier for you, including a free option, which gives you no excuse not to give it a try today. So if you want to level up your own content creation, then make sure you check out my affiliate link in the description below, and you can get started creating with StreamYard today.
Now, let's get back to our guest.
So change of state is something that I often talk about with athletes and working with people, is going from one spot to another. What's that journey look like to achieve the outcome that they desire? So it's interesting you talk about that's a focus of what are the tools that you use to actually get that change of state. Now, you're a four-time Australian memory champion. I don't think there's too many people that can put that next to their name. So what are the processes that go into training? Because there is this thing that's called like a memory athlete, or mental athleticism. What does the day of a mental athlete or a memory athlete actually look like?
There's been times where I was training, 10 minutes probably per week, and I ended up winning competitions. So it was pretty insane. But I'll go through the basic, structure of it. So memory competitions. I mean, back in my day, it's going back over 20 years now. What it would be like a 2-day, 3-day event around the world, and what would happen is that you'd have just random events, like you'd have names and faces. This will all be paper based, so random names of faces. Whoever memorized the most names wins. Numbers, like in rows of 40 digits. And if we make one mistake, we don't get 39 out of 40, we get 20 out of 40. And if we make two mistakes, we get 0. And the way that we'd memorize is in pairs of digits. So if we make one mistake, we're pretty much gone, right? So it was very high stakes competition. So one mistake could essentially, you can end up last, or if you get it correct, you can end up first. I actually came second 6 times, 6 years in a row. I came second. Pretty frustrated. I was memorizing more than everyone, but those little mistakes, I was not winning. So essentially, what we focus on as athletes is effectiveness, because we can't make a mistake at all. So we have to focus on perfect memory. Now, what does that involve? Right? That involves making perfect stories, connections. It also means the training time as well. It's like, how are you going to train? What resources are you going to use? Right? I was I was training when I was overseas, and I was just writing in a notebook, just random numbers without even thinking. Then I go back and review them. Then my friend, who we got into this sport with together, he built an online training system, which the whole world then got onto as well. So we're practicing on that. But essentially, what it is just printing out a bunch of papers with names and faces, numbers, random words, and just going through and memorizing as much as we can. Right, so that would be essentially the way we'd train. Now, the good thing is everything's online, right? One of the other 4-time memory champions, a good friend of mine, Simon Orton, co-developed this website, Memory League, and you can go on there, train on there. It's amazing, and you can also compete internationally as well and play against other people. So it's quite amazing, and a lot of my clients, I get on there just to train, and we'd go through encoding exercises, we'd go through storytelling exercises, but also things that I do, which is more coach based, is I do failure based training. So I get them to a point where they're always failing, so we can look at what we can learn from all those failures. I also do what I call 100% based training, which is the opposite of that. It's like, what's it going to take for you to always get 100% in your recall? It's very, very difficult, because you can review and repeat something over and over again, do some amazing connection using memory techniques, but still forget. So we look at that as well. There's also things, as you know, like athlete mindset, how you're feeling. I train athletes for the US competition as well, which is really big. And they've got even more cutthroat competition, because it's only like 4 or 5 events that they have, and they can't really make any mistakes. So it's like, how do you deal with that? So we look at endurance events as well. So how do you memorize for a longer period of time without your brain just feeling like mush? It happens. So there's a lot of things going on for athlete training, and competitions change a lot. But I look at it not as a memory coach, but just a general coach who's into mental performance and mental fitness, because it's not so much about remembering, it's about everything else that goes with it as well.
Once you've trained it, does it become more of a reflex than something you have to consistently work on? Is it always there?
It's a good question. I want to get back to the memory palace before, right? Let's say you've remembered those 4 items in the memory palace, right? You get back there and you want to reuse 4 new items on there. You make up stories. Now what's going to happen is you're going to get mixed up. with what was in there before, right? So we have to be really good at remembering, but also really good at forgetting as well, because we need to forget what was in there previously. So what we do have is we have multiple memory palaces, right? And multiple techniques so that we have to wait for the old ones to die off, use new ones, so that by the time we're finished with these ones, we go back to the old and hopefully we don't remember, what was in there previously. Yes, there are techniques out there to clear them off and whatever, but, you know, no one's really perfected it. I've got systems in place, but it's easier to just create new locations. So, yeah, anyone can do this. It is trainable. Now, do you get worse off if you haven't done it for a while? A little bit, not a lot, because it's easy to get back on because you know the process. You know that you have to make a story. You know that there's association involved. All of that. So once you know the process, yeah, it might be slower, but with more practice, you'll just get back to where you were. And I'm not just talking about memory athletes. This is just everyday people that want to know how to remember names or speeches or whatever, right? If you haven't used it for a while and you try and get back on, there's not going to be much difference. So there's a lot of uses for memory, and it's always changing. But I just focus on helping people as best as I can and get the message out far and wide, because there's so many people watching or listening going, you know what, didn't realize memory could fit into what I want to be able to do. And because when I think of memory, I just think of remembering. That's it. But I never thought you can manage stress, anxiety, reduce pain. Like I'm constantly being hospitalized and operations and all that sort of stuff. And I've used it to help myself not get into hospital and deliver speeches, on the stage and then go straight back to hospital. I mean, it's insane.
There's a lot around imagination, it seems here, and some people might not think that they have the best imagination or visualization techniques. I'm sure you've encountered those in your coaching. So what do you do to try and show or demonstrate to people that they can actually do this, that they can create those stories when some people just don't think they're good at creating stories?
Yeah, and this is a common thing that happens as well. Because here's the thing: there's really two types of people that come to you: people that are imaginative and creative, or people that just aren't. And the people that aren't, or say they think they can't, right? Is you show them memory principles, right? So emotion was one of them, right? As you were mentioning before, using your senses, right? If you can smell, taste, hear, we talked about seeing. If you can use a lot of them in your storytelling, then that takes it up to another notch. Movement, you can use color as well. So we're utilizing different modes to make things a little bit more memorable. And once you start doing that, even the person with the most crappiest imagination could start really improving. And like I said, it's not always about visual. It's about how you use your sense of self and environment, and also what you're feeling as well. So it's definitely highly trainable, and everyone's been able to do it that I've worked with anyway.
What sort of people do you think are challenged by this, genuinely or limited in their ability to also do this, or are there methods that can help even those that aren't that capable of perhaps improving it? Like,
Yeah, I mean, look, I've worked with stroke victims, people that have acquired brain injuries. I had one guy come to me, I did a little memory test on him. He forgot everything. Then I showed him a technique, right, which most people get all correct, and he only got one right. I'm like, hang on, something's not right. And I asked him a few questions and said, yeah, I was in a car crash. They took parts of my brain out, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, go see a, neuropsych or someone, not me. You need to see someone. And he said, no, I want to come to you. I'm like, dude, Anyway, we had a few sessions together, and no jokes, after about 6 sessions, he started remembering more than I was, right? So there's really no limit, right? If you can talk to someone, if you can visualize, even if you can't visualize, like I said, you can use memory principles to help you remember better. If you can do all those things, you can essentially do really, really well and utilize your skills for your advantage.
so students are one of the groups that I know you work with. What are the sort of strategies that you're implementing? Are they the same with students, or do you have something that you help students with, given the environment that they're actually learning in and the way we have been taught to learn?
Yeah, with students, I look at, okay, what are they dealing with, right? They get a lot of information thrown at them. So if you're trying to remember everything, you're just going to fail, right? Because the goal isn't to remember everything. That's the problem that students have. They're trying to get everything all in one go, right? The goal is really organizing the information, right? Once information is organized, then it's so much easier to comprehend, right? And understand. That's the key, understanding. Then once you understand, then the final bit is really recall. Right? So a lot of people get this back to front. They try and remember first, understand, right? So what I do with students say, okay, well, you got three options, right? Not three options, but three things you can do. What do you do before class, during class, and after class, right? Before class, if you map out, like mind mapping is a massive skill to organize, and you can mind map a whole book, right? Lots of books in like 30, 40 minutes. You can map out the whole book and pretty much get a good sense of what it's about, right? And then whenever you go to class, you can just put the notes into that organized mind map. So now what you do, you've got a structured set of information that you can look at rather than page by page. Now, if you're writing notes page by page, what happens is that, yes, it's in order, it's linear, but it's not organized, because something on page 12 might link to something on page 30. Something on page 30 might link to something on page 6. So it's all over the shop. Whereas if you're using a mind map or some sort of a system that organizes it, you can go directly to that bit of knowledge and then get the answer you want. Now, because you've saved a little bit more time, you can use that time to your advantage. So when you're after class, your review is a lot stronger. You can ask more questions, pose more questions, take more of a break, relax, all of that. So I look at the whole shebang of what students need and say, okay, memory skills, yeah, that's only a tiny percentage. And you'll learn that very quickly, right? Like a memory palace or visualization. The rest is organization and getting yourself right. And mindset is obviously another massive one as well, but I just help them with storytelling essentially, and that's what helps them, like procrastination and things like that. There's some really good memory techniques for how to reduce procrastination, right? Not just for students, but for everyone. So they're the kind of things that I essentially work with, not just with students, but everyone studying, whether it's for, law exams or whether it's medical stuff, whatever.
It seems that if you learn memorization techniques, that this can help you become, I'll use the word superhuman, probably too cliche, but it can help raise you above the norm, I guess. So how advantageous is this to actually helping someone advance their career?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I did, right? Because when you think about it, right, if you want to advance your career, what do you need? You need skills, right? Yes, you need experience, but you need the skills to practice and do so you can get to where you are. That's the only thing. Skills take time. What saves time? Utilizing these skills, memory skills. I'm not talking about memorization. When I say memory skills, it's the whole thing, like comprehension and rapid understanding, all of that. So once you have that, then you can get a whole bunch of skills. Like I actually went back to university after I learnt memory skills, and essentially this was 10 years after I finished my degree. So I went back and studied two master's degrees, and it just made me think so much differently about learning now, because it wasn't about picking up the skills. Like, man, I actually enjoy learning. I enjoy the process. And if you're enjoying the process, guess what? You're going to be able to implement in everyday life so much better as well, because now it's not about recalling this model and that model. It's like, well, how's that model going to help the business? So now you're thinking a lot more strategically. You're solving better problems rather than just trying to remember to pass an exam. So yeah, career development, it gets you to not just know the stuff so you can pass, but it gets you to rethink your, I guess, your what you want to be able to do in the future, because you're thinking at a more strategic level now rather than passing. You would know more than anyone, right? Being a coach, is that when you're working with people, you're not just working to give them the knowledge and the skills, you're working with them to change mindsets as well, to look beyond and create a vision, right? And working with people that have goals, you can actually create stories around their goals, right? Now, the problem here is, for example, people that want to lose weight, right? I'll give a classic example. They've got a goal. I need to lose, 12 kilos by this date, or, I need to lose this much. So their mindset's already wrong, right? Why? Because you don't do the goal, right? The goal is not done. The tasks are done, and the goal is only a result. So the mindset then shifts to, well, what task do I need to do, right, in order for that to happen, right? So I always look at what stories, instead of people creating a story in their mind for the goal at the end, which, yeah, we need to have vision and whatnot. But the actual thing that needs to be looked at is creating stories and visuals around the things that you need to do in order to get that goal. Because I think people do it the other way around. They say, oh, I've got this goal, and, put up the photos in front of them, and, I'm visualizing a beautiful house and, beautiful body and whatever. But you can't just keep staring at that and not putting in the work, right? If you can glorify the tasks needed to be done to perfect yourself, like, I need to go to the gym, I need to exercise, I need to eat well, and focus on doing those things, then guess what's going to happen? The result's going to take care of itself.
It makes sense, because success is actually a part of a bigger process, right? The goal's the end game. It's the result of a whole heap of things that go to getting to where you want to go. So that's that change of state, regardless of what you're actually doing. Speaker on a stage, corporate, C-suite executive who has trouble remembering names, student trying to attain their degree. Whatever that end game is, you're just giving them the tools and the focus and some techniques that are going to allow them to achieve that.
Like, you can have the best knowledge in the world, but if you don't use it, it's pointless, right? It's useless. And there are people out there that are professional learners. I'm sure you've come across this yourself as well. Well, they'll go do all the degrees, they'll do all the courses, and you see their LinkedIn profile, it's just one after another, right? And they just keep doing it, but they're not doing anything. Really, all they're doing is learning, but not applying anything. It's like, just go and do something, but then spend more of your time doing it. Like, what I do is, I don't read 100 books a year. I read one and try and implement that throughout, however long it takes. And for me, that's a better way of understanding a book than to just read it and try and remember it, because you're going to remember it if you're, applying it. I'm not talking about, your novels and stuff like that. This is just nonfiction, but, I'm learning skills, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, the goal is to understand how these skills can really help you, not just with memory. I mean, we're just using memory because, that's what I brought up with. But like you said, you can use it for any other thing, and the foundations will still be the same.
Can you explain this concept of spaced repetition? Is that sort of when you're saying with one book over time, you'll actually work on something over a period of time? Is that an assessment of that? Have I got that right? Spaced repetition?
Spaced repetition is more in terms of, I guess, learning something. So, for example, let's say I'm learning a language, right? And I memorize, say, 20 phrases in a day, right? Then the next day I might do 20, next day I might just do 20 phrases in a day. What's going to happen is, if I do daily 20 phrases, the following day, yesterday's 20 phrases, I'm mostly going to forget. Right? So what I need to do is I need to go back and review those phrases, say 24 hours later. Then I need to review them a week later, 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, until it gets embedded into long-term memory. So that's what it is. It's just a duration period where you just need to review and top up that knowledge.
We talked about pattern recognition, I guess, to a degree, when you're talking about things like chunking and visualizing groups as ways of memorizing. So is visualization, I guess, things we're familiar with, emotions, smell, all these things, is that really at the core of what this is? Is it just our ability as humans, even like knowing a face, but linking it to things we already know? Is it about patterns and just building a grouping of patterns that we can identify quickly?
That actually works a lot quicker, the pattern recognition, than your visualizing and associating whatever, because all those visualizing tools that I mentioned, it's all a conscious process, and it's still fast. I mean, that's the world that I operate in. But if you want to go a step quicker, there and look at patterns and so on, then you're getting into a different territory, which is, speed sort of recognition rather than remembering and recall. And we do that in general as well. I mean, you're crossing the street, right? You're recognizing patterns where cars coming from and all that sort of stuff. We have this inbuilt in with us, right, as humans. So we need those skills. Can you incorporate it to actual memory training? Definitely. And that's something that I'm working on at the moment as well with all my testing and research. And the next book that I'm writing is based on pattern recognition and, training your memory to a degree where you don't even have to remember. It's just recognition and you've got it in your head.
The reason I bring that up actually is because I've interviewed a couple of ex-military guys and they rated highly their officers, and one was a commando, and they rated highly in their pattern recognition. So just out of interest, do you work with the military yourself, or have you worked in these spaces? And what sort of work, if you have you done with the military?
Yeah, I haven't done military. Yeah, so that's the one group I haven't done, but I can definitely see how that would work because it's not so much about pattern as well. It's also about attention, awareness. You want to be able to see exactly what the hell's going on, and that requires certain other skills as well, aside from visualization and so on. So, and also intuition comes in as well, which is, no one even talks about that in the memory circles, and it's something I am working with. So yeah, definitely those type of skills, that's exactly what's needed in those scenarios.
Is there anything that's really intrigued you in this space that was unexpected?
So many things. Like I said, I just thought memory was remembering. And then once I got deeper in now, I thought, gee, we can, manage time, we can, reduce stress, as you mentioned, athlete performance, all of that stuff. It's really quite mind blowing. The more you dig deeper into the whole of memory, you're getting into a different world of performance and managing your energy and mental state. So I'll give you an example, right? With procrastination, I mentioned that earlier as well, right? We procrastinate because it's comfortable at the time. We might be withholding, doing more difficult tasks, and so on, right? So people procrastinate. One method that I found, and this is just purely by using memory techniques, is if you just go and do a task for 1 minute, so set a timer for 1 minute, what's going to happen is that now you're going to get to the task. And because it's 1 minute, the brain doesn't like non-closure. It always likes closure. It likes closing a loop, right? So what's going to happen is as soon as you do a task for 1 minute, you're only just going to get started, right? But here's the kicker. The issue isn't doing a task for 1 minute. The issue is getting to the task, right? Which is why we procrastinate, because we're not getting to the task. If you can hack your brain to get to that task, you've essentially solved that problem. Now that 1 minute, you can just go for an hour now, right? A lot of the time, what we do as humans is we block out time in terms of half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, nice, beautiful circular blocks, right? Nice little closures. But if you make, say, odd timings, like 17 minutes, 23 minutes, right? 25 minutes, like what the Pomodoro technique is about. Then what's going to happen is you go, hang on, it's only 17 minutes. I'll go do this thing. Now, what usually happens is that if you've set something for an hour and you've procrastinated on it, that hour is gone. But it's hard to procrastinate on something that goes for 17 minutes. So you'll end up doing it. But also, you can keep going from 17 minutes. So the 17 minutes is not only way more productive than the hour that you've set, right? You're actually getting stuff done. So that's what I've learned from mental storytelling. The other way of doing it is what Mel Robbins calls it the 5 second rule, where you actually cut the storytelling from your brain and then go and do the thing. So, for example, you need to get out of bed. If you're in bed, lying down, you're comfortable, you're focusing on your comfort, you're feeling the comfort, right? The stories are building. And the more you do that, the more you're going to stay in bed because you're so, relaxed and comfortable and you don't want to get out, blah, blah, blah. If you just count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bang, get up, what you're doing is you're short circuiting that story so that you don't have time to convince yourself to, fall back asleep. So you can either create a really big story to get you where you want, or you can cut that story and then do that thing.
When you fail, how does that help you learn these techniques?
I like that you mentioned the failure, because I mean you're a master coach yourself, so you understand all of this. But look, as a coach, I love getting deep and try and understand, what is it about the person? Because sometimes it's not about memory or the skills. Sometimes it's about, I got to keep up with the Joneses, and you got to tell the person straight, right? Or sometimes it's about confidence, or it's a relationship problem. So there's so many things going on in the person, and I just love getting deep. I'm a nerd on memory techniques and training, so I always look at the data, and data is the best place to analyze performance, because if you can analyze and see how that person's going from the numbers, then it's easier to say, well, look at this, you're trending upwards, or you know what, your training shows that you're doing good, but you're not doing any practice in real life. What's going on? So I always try and look at quantitative data, right, and qualitative to a degree as well. So that's what I love. But I think it's ultimately up to the individual, whether they want to take themselves up to that next level or not.
Is there a time that you might wish that you didn't actually train this as a skill, like where you wish you could forget?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's people that, suffer trauma and things like that. And like I said, I've done it to myself so many times, where even the tiniest of events, someone cut me off in traffic, it'll be on my mind for hours, if not days, right? So that's what a highly developed memory can do. But now that I know that that's an issue, I can quickly change that. So yeah, there is a downside to having a good memory, of course, because the storytelling is affected. But you can always change it as well.
So if people want to get in touch with you to work with you, how do they go about doing that?
I mean, my website's probably the first point of call. It's just my name, tanselali.com. Or they could just jump on my socials. I'm on Instagram. What is it? LinkedIn. I'm trying to remember. TikTok, whatever. The funny thing is I don't even have socials on my phone. So I just jump on, the internet when I get a chance and check them. But the website's probably the best, because I'll respond to pretty much every email that comes my way. And yeah, I also have free lessons too, by the way. So yeah, again, I'm happy to sort of share that link. My YouTube channel has got that link actually. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll be able to get onto those free lessons, which we talked about Memory Palace. I actually, believe it or not, I put all my best memory lessons as free lessons from that website. So I just thought, you know what, if people want to learn memory techniques, they can just go and learn it, rather than ask a million questions. So they can do that. Just jump on my YouTube channel, and they can just download whatever.
Are you still doing much on YouTube? I haven't seen too much come up in my feeds on LinkedIn of videos.
Your feedback was just absolutely invaluable, because just having a whiteboard there, even as a thumbnail, the viewership just went crazy, and that's been the best. So what I'm doing now is I'm recording these, talking to the camera, but I'm also writing and drawing on my iPad as well. So what I'm going to do is essentially have me face, and then a few seconds later switch to the iPad. So I'm happy with where it's at the moment. It's just I'm just pulling off a lot more content. Yeah.
Well, thanks for all that insight into numbers, learning names, and other methods, even spoke on speed reading and everything of that nature. So thanks, Tansel Ali, and I appreciate you being part of the People with a Passion podcast.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on.
You too can learn how to be a successful content creator for reach, respect, and revenue. Join me, Craig Rowe, the founder of Applaudable Media, as I help you navigate the journey of creating your very own content. Subscribe to Modern Media Makers on YouTube to give voice to your brand and learn digital content strategies that work for you 24/7.